Hi guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Bimleke Matilda. To my subscribers, I say welcome back to my channel. And if this is your first time of coming across this channel, I say welcome. Please do well to subscribe to this channel. Today, I'll be teaching us how to make this long bubu with shoulder pleats. If it is something you'll be interested in, please keep watching. For this bubu, I'll be making use of 3.5 yards of a brocade fabric. The first thing I'll be doing is to remove the lapel from the wideness of the brocade in order to get a very long strip. So I'm going to fold the fabric together this way and cut out 5 inches that I'll be needing for the strip. I'm cutting out the strip so that I can have a long strip. That's why I'm cutting out the strip first. So I'll measure out 5 inches, then cut it out. So I'll keep this. The next thing I'm going to be doing now is to fold the fabric into two and confirm what I have left, which is going to be 25 inches. Then I'll fold that using the length. So that's 25 inches twice, and I'll double it. So it's making 25 inches folded in 4 places. On fold, there will be no joining at the shoulder. So for the wideness here, I'm going to be having 25 inches. And you measure whatever you need for your length. For my length, I'm having 16 inches plus 2 inches that I'll use for joining. For hemming at the lower part, it does not have joining at the shoulder. So the next thing I will do now is to measure out the neck. For the back neck, I'll be using 3 inches wideness and 1 inch for the depth. I'll connect that together. Then for the front, I'll be using 9 inches for the depth. You can try to use 8 inches for your own or 10, depending on how low or how high you want it to be. So the next thing now I will be doing is to measure out the sleeve opening. The camera is not covering that, but that's just at the edge of the fabric. So I measured out 13 inches. The next thing I will do is to measure shoulder to hip. For this client, our shoulder to hip is 27 inches. I won't be adding ½ inch because there's no joining at the shoulder. For bubu, depending on how wide you want your bubu to be, will determine what you measure out. For some people, you can use 15 for them, but for this particular client, I'll be using 20 inches wideness. So at the hand opening, where the hand opening stops, that is the 13 inches I measured earlier, I'll measure 20 inches. Then at the hip area too, I will repeat the same thing and measure the same 20 inches. But for the hem line, let me shift it so that you can see it. For the hem line, I'm not going to be measuring the 20 inches. I'm going to be dividing my hip measurements by 4. Then I'll be adding 3 inches. So here I have 16 inches. So I'll measure 16 inches and connect it to the 20 inches up. Then I'll connect it to the arm opening and curve it this way. Then now I'm going to cut out the back neckline and cut out the excess also at the side. So now what I cut out is what I'm going to be keeping, and that's what we'll be using for our inner belt. So the next thing I did was to iron the shoulder to create a crease line for us to know the shoulder point. After doing that, I opened it up, separating the front from the back. So now I'm creating a line at the shoulder. Just know the shoulder point will be obvious for you to see. Then the next thing I will do is to measure the neck depth for the front, which is 9 inches as I measured earlier. Then from there, I'm going to be measuring 1 inch down. That 1 inch that I'm measuring down on fold becomes 2 inches. That is what we're going to be replacing back as the lapel. So I need to cut that out from it. So I'll connect it to the 3 inches. So before cutting that out, I need to create my pleats. So from where the neckline ends, which is 3 inches, I'm going to measure 5 inches because our shoulder is 16. So divided by 2 will be giving me 8. So that is why I'm measuring 5. 5 plus 3 is giving us 8. So that is where it's going to be on our shoulder. So from that point, I'm going to be measuring 6 inches. Then I'll look for the midpoint of the 6 inches, which is 3 inches. So our pleat, when folded, will be 3 inches. So from that point, I'll measure 16 inches. That's the length of the pleat. So whatever I have at the shoulder point, I'll be repeating it at that 16 inches I measured from the shoulder. You can decide how low you want your pleat to be. You can even decide to take your pleat from that shoulder down to the hem. But for these, I'll be using just 16 inches. That's, I want it to end just an inch before our waistline. So what I did on the shoulder was the same thing I repeated on that 16 inches. That is, I measured the 8 inches for the shoulder, then 6 inches for the pleat wideness, and I got the midpoint, which is 3 inches. So I'll be repeating the same thing also at the back. I'll measure the back, which is 8 inches, and then 6 inches for the wideness of the pleat. Then look for the center, which is 3 inches. So when we fold the pleat is going to be 3 inches on fold. But open this way, it's going to be 6 inches. So I'll connect the lines also. So whatever I did here, I'm going to repeat it at the other side of the fabric. So now cut out the 1 inch for the front opening. So the next thing I'll do now, I want to transfer this line to the other side of the fabric. So I pinned it to know the exact point, and I traced it out at the other side. So now after doing that, I opened up the entire fabric. So the next thing I'll be doing now is to pleat it. So I'm going to hold it together, making sure the first measurement I did, the first point from the 5 inches is touching the 6 inches. Then at the point of that shoulder to 16 I measured, I'll do the same thing and hold the pleats. So if you measure it now, you see that it is 3 inches that is there. I'll do the same thing also at the back, making sure the midpoint is at the midpoint. Then I'll pin it together. So that's it. So now I'm going to confirm if it's 3 inches that is there. So that's 3 inches. 3 inches. Also at that 16 point is going to be 3 inches too. I'm going to repeat the same thing at the other side. Then I'll give it a good press. So now I've ironed it out. So from that shoulder point, I'm going to measure out 5 inches down. For the front and the back also 5 inches. That will be making it 10 inches. That is what I'm going to stitch down. That is all I'm going to be stitching to hold down the plate. I repeated the same measurement for the other side. You can decide to stitch it up to the 16 inches point or stitch it down even to the hem. But for me, I like it this way. I just want to hold it down at the shoulder alone. So 5 inches in front, 5 inches at the back. So I'll be sewing down 10 inches for the front and the back at both sides. So now that I'm done stitching that, I'm going to measure out what I have at the opening. For the collar, I'm going to measure out the round from the hem to the back neck and down to the other side of the hem. Whatever you have there, you're going to add excess to it so that you can add like 4 inches excess to it so that you won't be short of fabric when you fix it. So now this is the strip I cut earlier, the 5 inches, and on fold here, we're going to be having 2.5 inches. So half will be for the joining and 2 inches will be the exact lapel. So now I've gone ahead to add stitch to it. Then I'll go ahead and fix it all around the opening and the neckline. So now that I'm done fixing it, I've gone ahead to fix it. So this is it, and I've given it a good press. The next thing is to pin it together because it's going to be overlapped on each other. So you're going to measure your neck depth from your shoulder. Depending on how low you want it to be. For me, I'm using 9 inches. You can try to use whatever you want. But before then, I need to fix my belt. So the strip we cut earlier is going to be used for the belt. So I've gone ahead to sew it. Then from shoulder, I measured shoulder to 16 inches. That's where I'm going to be placing my belt. Just at the end of that pleat that we created earlier. So make sure you place the flap on each other. Then you look for the midpoint of the flap. So from that midpoint, I'm going to be using to measure both sides of the waist. So for this person's waist, depending on your client's waist, for this person's waist, our waist is 32. So divided by 2, I'm going to be having 16 inches. From that 16 inches, I'll be minusing 3 inches for the belt placement. So if I minus 3 inches from the 16, I'll be having 13 inches. So it means from that midpoint, I'll be measuring 6.5, 6.5 because it's 13 inches. So at that 6.5, that point where 6.5 is ending is where I'm going to be placing my belt. So I'll pin my belt to that point I measured. So if your own client's waist is 34, so divided by 2, you're going to be having 17, and 17 minus 3 or minus 2, depending on whichever one. Just that you just make sure that the belt is not at the exact point of the person's waist to get a perfect snitching at the waistline. So now I'll go ahead and stitch it down. So now that that is done, the next thing to do is to place the lapel on each other. But before you place it, make sure you have overlocked the joining. So now I'll place the lapel on each other. Okay, then carefully pin it down. So that it can stay in place. So whatever you want your neck depth to be, you measure. For this, I'm using 9 inches, and I've already indicated it earlier. I've measured out the 9 inches. Then for the slit, I'll measure how long I want the slit to be. So that is where I'll stop my stitching for the overlapping. So you can decide how long you want your slit to be, or if you want it to be short, or even if you don't want slit at all there. But for this one, it has slit, and I use 16 inches for the slit. So I'll chalk that point where 16 inches in. That is where I'll be stopping my stitching. So the next thing is to take it to the machine and stitch that down. Then the next thing to do after stitching that down is just to join it at the sides. So now I'm done stitching. So now I'll flip it to the other side, to the wrong side. And join it at both sides. Whatever you added as your sewing allowance is what you'll be joining. You can use half an inch and you can use 1 inch. So for the sides, I'll be using half an inch to join it. Then whatever you added as your sewing allowance for the hemming part is what you use to hem it. So now I've gone ahead to join it and also hem the lower part. And that is it for this boubou. So the next thing you're going to be doing is to give it a good press. And that will be all for that. So if you're interested in the braided headband I made with this boubou, watch out for the next video. I'll be illustrating how I made that in that next video. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and ask your question in the comment section.